We are back. All righty. What a day. It's been a wild, busy day, but I am excited to see you guys here. What's going on? What's going on, Ginger Ninja? What's going on? Welcome to YouTube Live. Today, we got to talk about some exciting stuff. We're talking about inflammation. We're talking about the root cause of disease. I apologize. I was an hour late. I got some time zones mixed up, had a meeting. And now we're at it. Yeah, the mic does look professional, but it's connected to my computer and not my cell phone. So what's going on? What's going on, Kid Life Crisis? So I want to do some housekeeping really quick with this because there's going to be some changes to like how we do these lives. And I want you guys to know, since you guys are the ones who tune in, right? So what I'm going to be doing going forward is every week, like similar to this, we're gonna do like a lunchtime type of thing, on a topic, and it's gonna be available for everyone. However, what we're going to do is do it on a Zoom call, so it will still be live. You'll still be able to tune in. The reason I want to use it on Zoom is so I can share my screen. It's so that you can see what I'm talking about because I use images in a lot of these talks because I have my own notes that I go through, as you guys know. And I want you guys to see those notes. So I can't really do that, obviously, on Instagram. I can't do that on YouTube, or at least I don't know how, or I don't have the software, but I can do it on Zoom. So I will put that out going forward. It'll be live. If you join the free group, my free group, which you could check out the link in my bio, you can check that out there. And I will put this. Want to work on, let's see. I just want to put this in. Sorry, I apologize for the delay, but we're going to get to it. DMV. All right. And what I've been wanting to do more recently is do a hybrid one-on-one, but also group, putting people through detoxes to understand not only how to do it, but more importantly, how to do it season to season, if you want, multiple times a year, and get all of my information out in one place. So if you want to work with me, this is probably the best way to do it. Yes, I still work with people one-on-one, and it's been fantastic, but this is a way to learn more, understand kind of all the concepts that I put out there in one place versus somewhere else. Plus, you get to join my weekly calls as part of my membership, get access to all my courses, all the fun stuff. With that out of the way, let's talk about inflammation and what's going on with this. So I like starting these talks off talking about the 5 keys to regeneration and reversing disease because it's a very simple framework to kind of see how these things work. Now, we have 5 things that we do both at the full level as far as a human being level, but also at the cellular level. 5 things. We need to take in nutrients. We need to get rid of the waste after we use these nutrients, like uric acid, lactic acid, other things that urea. We need to get rid of these things, stool. We need to get rid of these things at the human level. Growth, the ability for us to grow into mature human being adults, but also the growth of individual cells. Reproduction, again, to both reproduce the species, but also reproduce new cells to replace ones that die. Right? We have red blood cells that reproduce or replace their other ones every 90 days or so. We have stomach cells that reproduce and replace themselves every like 3 to 5 days. So it's pretty amazing, like what we're able to do. And then adaptation. This is the part that I think a lot of people don't take seriously or don't fully understand, is that like if we create the hard things that we're supposed to create, if we create hard things in our life, like doing a hard workout, like getting heat or cold exposure, and we survive, quite literally, the saying like, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. That is literally what happens in our lives. So the more comfortable, if we live a life that is completely comfortable with no, adversity, with everything happy, like happiness does not exist if sadness did not. We would not appreciate sunny, beautiful days like today if it didn't rain or there weren't thunderstorms. So that we live in this like duality, and you have to understand that life exists in that duality. And if we don't appreciate both sides of the equation, then I think we're missing the point of life, and that could be reflected in your health. But be that as it may, we're going back to these five things. Again, assimilation of nutrients, excretion, getting rid of the wastes. We have growth, reproduction, adaptation. Those are the five things. Any action that you take that improves the function of any of those five things, going to be good for your health. Anything you do that inhibits the function of those five things, not good for your health. It is that simple. Our body is so intelligent, it can adapt to so many different environments, provided we're doing what it takes to get there. And the more sometimes we push it, or the more we grow and adapt, the stronger and more resilient we become. Truth is, like somewhere between, in my opinion, 97 to 99% of all illness, or what we call disease, is just a response to physical, chemical, or emotional stress, which brings on something called acidosis, or what we call inflammation. So when you hear people talk about acidity, think inflammation. They are synonymous. So it's important. Now, what does that kind of mean? So let's kind of jump into that, because we talk a lot about, acidity, alkalinity. Like, what are these concepts we're talking about? Because it's important to get this in mind if we understand the importance of making proper dietary decisions, living a life that makes more sense, living in conjunction with nature. How do we like fit all into this? Now, like I was mentioning, like the world exists in opposites, and this is where I think like older theories of medicine, like traditional Chinese medicine, for example, it does a fantastic job of painting this picture of the interplay of opposites. In their case, they have yin and yang, hot and cold, alkaline and acidity. Like there's a bunch of different things going on, but it's not a question of like, is one bad and the other's good. It's a balance, and when that balance is out of balance, we run into problems. So it doesn't mean that acids are inherently bad. In fact, that's not necessarily true. It becomes a problem when there's too much of it. But the same thing can go the other way. Just the world we live in tends to be more acid heavy, acid forming, inflammation forming. So, what are acids? Acids are just chemical compounds that always have hydrogen as part of their makeup. So, you'll see this in chemistry. It'll have like a little H plus. Those are generally your acids. Then they usually supply positively charged they're hydrogen ions, which you will see. And the degree of acidity is determined by the number of hydrogen ions in that solution. And that is the potential for hydrogen, also known as pH. Um, so the acids give protons, which create binding. So, or bonding. So it allows these bonds to take place. This is what these protons do. You have to think of it. Remember, opposites attract. So when we have more of that, it's going to allow for more bonding, more binding. Bases, on the other hand, generally speaking, are negatively charged, and they're attracted to protons. So we have positively charged protons, negatively charged. Usually you'll see this written as OH minus. We have the positive, the minus, the negative, they attract. So that's ultimately what's going on. So how does this make sense? So an example of this like would be like we have toxic acids that are produced from digestion, like sulfuric acid, phosphoric acid. These are converted into non-toxic salts using alkaline elements. So we have something that's acidic, positively charged, has to be neutralized by something that's negatively charged. It creates a salt, and then it can be passed on through urine, usually, or through stool, depending on where it is. So that is ultimately what this is. It's this balance, it's this interplay between acids and bases. And for simplicity standpoint, we have to understand that if we want a flourishing, nourished body, we need to have a balance of roughly 80% alkaline to 20% acid. So it's not a 50-50 split. We thrive more so in an 80% alkaline environment at least. You can push it further if you want for certain times, particularly in detoxification. But that's a separate story for another day. We're not necessarily going to talk about that. But what we do need to talk about is are a lot of the things that cause us to be in an acidic state more often, because that is ultimately what goes on with a lot of people. So, what creates this acidic environment? It could be things like prescription medications, different types of forced medical procedures. It could be diet is a big thing, particularly processed sugars and processed flours, and meats and dairies are very heavy. They leave acidic ashes. And considering when we're talking about processed sugar, dairy, breads, pastas, buns, burgers, steaks, cheese, this is predominantly what most people eat. So this is very acidic in nature. And some of the differences, just before we kind of jump into this, is like acids tend to inflame and raise core body temperature, cause inflammation because they cause binding. Bases tend to be a little bit more inflammatory and allow for things to disperse. Acids are more coagulative. In other words, they bring things together to bond. So coagulation, things like tumors forming, things like leaching different types of minerals. In alkaline mediums, there's more of a cationic or a dispersal. It allows for thinning. Think of blood clots, for example. That would only happen in an acidic environment. So when we're in an acidic inflammatory state, it creates the bonding of things like fats and minerals and other constituents to create things like stones, liver stones, gallbladder stones, kidney stones. These can only exist if the body is in an acidic environment. Because what happens is the body tries to respond. Our pH is roughly around 7.4. It does not deviate far from that. It can't. We would actually die. So in order to maintain that in an acidic environment, the body has to get these minerals from somewhere. And there's 4 ways that the body alkalizes itself. It's through water, it's through cholesterol, it's through fat, and it's through usually calcium, but can also be other minerals. So those are the 4 ways. We have water, fat, cholesterol, minerals, usually calcium. Now, where are calcium and most of your minerals stored in the body? They are stored in usually bone tissue in your teeth, both bone and teeth, for the most part. That is the mineral bank, the bone bank, if you want to call it that. So like if we get, say, like teeth modeling or issues with the teeth, or gums, first thing I think of is what is the acidic environment causing that? Because those things are being leached from the teeth, from the bone, to keep the pH around 7.4 where it's supposed to be. And the body will do whatever it can. It'll take the bicarbonate from the pancreas, and the digestive enzymes from the pancreas to help alkalize what's in the digestive tract. But if we're constantly putting more acidic things like coffee, like a lot of meats, like dairies, like processed foods, sodas, like these things are super acidic, and it's going to tax the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, all of these things to make a more alkaline environment once everything passes from the stomach into the small intestine. So what are some of the diseases that are associated with acidosis? Again, these are things with inflammation. Alzheimer's, autism, asthma, depression, signs of aging, strokes, cardiovascular diseases, fibromyalgia, cancer, diabetes, your neurological diseases, Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's, or ALS, Huntington's, arthritis. All of these things are essentially acidic bodies, which are inflamed bodies. They are coagulative bodies. Now, inflammation is important because it's not something that we necessarily need to, get rid of. It's not something that has no purpose in the body. If I cut my hand, maybe I'm cutting something with a knife and I slice my hand, I want that inflammation to be there because it can actually save your life. The four signs, and this is actually something we learned in school. The four signs of acute inflammation, they're the four ors: tumor, calor, rubor, dolor. Tumor, swelling; calor, heat; calorie, what is calorie? It's the measure of, what is the amount you need to raise 1 cubic centimeter of water 1 degree centigrade. That's essentially what a calorie is. Rubor, redness, think ruby. Dolor is pain. There's no great one for pain, but dolor is pain. So tumor, calor, rubor, dolor. You need those four things in an acute inflammatory environment because the body needs to send white blood cells, needs to send platelets, needs to send all these other things to initiate the healing response. These are things you need. And so this is why it's so important in those acute environments. The problem is, if this acute inflammatory response is always going off, what's going to happen over time? Cholesterol is going to go up, right? Because cholesterol is, again, it's, we need that to alkalize the body, like water, like minerals, like fat. So, if we're constantly in a flight or fight, a stress state, and in an inflamed in state for any physical, chemical, emotional stress, we're going to run into issues. And those are the things that usually get affected the most. So again, weak bones, weak teeth, fat deposits in the body, because the body, if it cannot handle getting rid of toxins at a given time, the liver is really smart. It's like, hey, we could put it in fat tissue for now. Let's leave it there until we can start processing it again. So fat tissue isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's also not necessarily related to as how much you eat, although it can be. So it's not like a one-to-one thing. But what can happen is, if you're constantly putting a huge toxic load, a huge acidic load on the body, eventually that liver is going to get backed up. And I'm not even talking about like the daily things that most people do, like have a ton of coffee or drink alcohol or smoke. Like, these are all other toxins that have to go in along with that daily stuff that you're doing. Liver has a cap. It can't cycle everything. And if it gets backed up, hey, we need to put this away. Hey, we need to put this, in fat tissue for now until we can handle it. And then that builds up over time. So why we end up sometimes with excess weight, and I was definitely this person, it's because we literally do not have we are in such an acidic, inflamed state that we can't break it down. We can't cycle through the toxins in a way that we can to efficiently get them out of the body. So, a couple like things that might be useful to talk about, because you might hear these terms as we're kind of going here, or when it comes to alkalinity and acidity. So we have oxidation, so oxidizing. This is essentially you're breaking down. We have catabolism, which is also kind of like a breaking down. So catabolism, when we have metabolism, right? Metabolism is essentially the rate at which you build things up and break them down. Catabolism is a breaking down. Anabolism is building up. And I remember I came up in the sports space. Big thing was anabolic steroids. What do anabolic steroids do? They build things up. There we go. So we mentioned, like, so those are the four mechanisms the body has to neutralize the pH. There are other things we can do too, but these are like the end results. So we mentioned the bone bank: calcium, magnesium, iodine, potassium, sodium. All of these are alkalizing minerals at the end of the day, and they're stored largely in bone, tissue, teeth, in the body. But the kidneys are incredibly important for this as well. So the kidneys, one of the main jobs of the kidneys is to balance pH. So the urine should actually be slightly acidic. It should be in like the 6 to 6.5 pH range. And you could easily measure this. You simply go on Amazon or go wherever you need to go to get pH strips, pH paper, and you can actually measure this. So you can, get a piece of paper, you can use it and kind of see where your urine's at. Ideally, it should be, again, within that 6 to 6.5 range. Ideally. So, if we're constantly in a state of catabolism, we're in a state of metabolic breakdown. So things are being broken down. If we're in a state of anabolism, this is going to be constructive metabolism. It's going to help with regrowth and repair. And essentially, if we break it down, remember we talked about the 5 keys to regeneration. Essentially, what's important to know is that if we are doing more things to build, regrowth, and repair compared to break down, we have health. If we have more things that are supposed to break down the body versus build up, we have disease. That's it. It can be broken down to something that simple if you want it to be. So if we just like zoomed out at all the different things we're doing, at all the different things that come in and broke it down to, are we regenerating more than we're breaking down? Or is it the other way? That is the best way to just kind of realize, okay, we're living in a state that supports healing and health, or we're in a state that supports disease and breakdown. That is fundamentally what we're talking about with alkalinity and acidity. So I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, like, we could absolutely talk more about it. I talk about this in my detox course. We would go over this in incredible detail. But that's something we could kind of talk about later if you want. And this is where the lymphatic system comes in. So we have 2 fluids in the body. We have blood and we have lymph. And lymph, you could also call your interstitial fluid. That's where it's going to go to. It's going to go through the lymph nodes. So with that, those 2 fluids make up 100% of the fluid in your body. But the key is we spend so much time talking about blood and blood tests and what's in your blood and all this. And while that's important and useful, it's only 20% of all the fluid in the body. The other 80% is lymphatic fluid. And your lymphatic system, it's not really a true system, although we have lymphatic vessels. It has in it the majority of our immune system. So our immune system primarily is found within these lymphatic vessels. Now, I know I've talked about, and this is important, that 80% of your immune system is in the gut. Well, technically, it's not in the gut, it's at that gut lining. So all of our gut, that gut tube, the small intestine, large intestine, it's lined with a ton of lymphatic vessels. And it's actually called something. It's gut-associated lymphoid tissue. This lines that entire thing. And that gut lining is only 1 cell layer thick. So this lymphatic system has to go through everything that's coming through that interface between the gut and the internal body. Because if you think about it, the gut is essentially one long tube that has one end out the front, one end out the back, but it's an external environment. It is not our internal body. It is external. And the body only lets in what it needs and leaves everything so that we can excrete it or get rid of things once the cells use up what they need. So cells, for example, use things like oxygen. They want pyruvate to create energy, but there are byproducts created through this. Those byproducts are dumped into the interstitial fluid. That interstitial fluid is picked up by the lymphatic system, which is where your immune system is. It's taken to the kidneys, where it is then cycled out of the body through urine. That's essentially what happens. When inflammation is present, when you have a high acidic load, again, those are synonymous, it can back things up. You have to think of this very similar to as you would think of your bathroom or your sewer system in your house. Would you constantly want to flush a toilet that is backed up? Of course not. You would end up with a very messy house in a very short amount of time. That is what the sewer system is. If that is backed up, we have to figure out A, why is it backed up? And then B, fix the blockage. Why is the septic tank not flowing? Why is, the toilet backed up? And once we do, we can then start to break things up. Now, some of it can be that inflammation, that clumping, that coagulation makes things thick. It's harder to get through. When that happens, again, this is why you don't want to, if you've ever done coconut pulling, so you use coconut oil, And if you've ever listened to someone who knows what they're talking about, they'll say, hey, don't spit it down the drain. Don't spit it down your sink. Don't spit it down the toilet. Why? Because that fat will gum up the tubes. And then you have a bigger problem because now you have to fix your tubes. Nothing's flushing. The tubes get backed up. It becomes a problem. Similar thing here. If it becomes too acidic, there's too much coagulation. Hey, we can't get to where we need to get to. We're running into some issues here. So, really important to kind of keep that in mind. So, like I mentioned, one of the ways that we can check this is by measuring our pH, our urine pH. And ideally, we want to see that between 6 and 6.5. That's really where it wants to be. Now, if you see sediment in your urine, that's actually a good sign. That means your lymphatic system is filtering the things it needs to out through the kidneys, into the bladder, out the body. That's actually good. If you have no sediment in your urine, that's usually a sign that the kidneys aren't functioning as well as they should be. So, every so often, if you want, you can urinate into a jar and actually let it settle for a few minutes and see if you see any sediment in it. And then I would again clean the jar and put that down the toilet. This is I know I'm not even gonna go down that, but not even gonna go down that route today. I don't even want to. So that's where it's at. So when we're talking about acids and bases too, like again, this oxidation and we have oxidation and reduction, and the oxidation is the losing of electrons. The reduction is gaining electrons. So it's kind of backwards if you kind of think of it. But what you want ideally is when we have these free radicals, these things that cause damage. You ever hear of antioxidants? Antioxidants are something that bring electrons to a free radical so that it is then neutralized. So the free radical gains the electron and then it becomes stable. If it's unstable, if it doesn't have the number of electrons it needs in its orbit, then it leads to big issues. So that's what antioxidants do. They donate these electrons to whatever's needed so that it stabilizes said free radical and you continue going on with your day. Now, what are some of the things that are going to increase the free radical load on the body? I mean, there's a lot, but we talked about a bunch of them. Like the big things are going to be the dietary things, the sugars, the meats, the dairies, the processed sugars, the buns, the pastas. All of these things are going to do it. What can also add to that acidic load, though, alcohol, caffeine, coffee is a huge, huge one. Medications are all, generally speaking, acid forming. Actually, all are. So that's going to add to this acidic load, this coagulation load. Um, Injectable medical procedures can absolutely do it. And this is why, again, it's a massive issue. I know we still have to talk in code, but that's going to be the way it is. We now live in a time where we are more exposed to more toxins than human beings have ever been in. So that's going to add to it. So environmental pollution, that's a big thing. Stress can do it. Any physical, chemical, emotional stress, literally negative thinking. A great way to look at this: if you eat, breathe, think, put it on your skin, it can affect you. So if you're thinking it, if you're eating it, if you're breathing it, if you're drinking it, if you're putting it on your skin, those 5 things, it can affect this balance. So that's one of the big things we need to do. So that's first. First, we have to get rid of the toxic stuff that's creating the acidic environment. That's step 1. Step 1. Other things, antibiotics, I didn't mention. When you affect that internal ecosystem, that gut, it's going to cause quite a bit of issues as well. Because now, again, we talked about that gut lining. That's going to put extra stress on the immune system and cause some other issues down the road as well. What else? What is going to alkalize your body? It's going to be, again, primarily your fruits, your vegetables, your nuts, and your seeds. Those are your alkalizing foods for the most part. Some nuts, some seeds can be a little bit more acid forming. Again, It's more about having that 80-20 balance overall. We definitely want stages in our lives where we need to build, that we need, that energy for stuff. We need that protein for stuff. But for the most part, everyone is way too far down this acidic end, leading to acidic, inflamed bodies. We need to alkalize the body. How do we do that? Generally speaking, we need at least roughly about a pound of raw vegetables per 50 pounds of body weight per day. If you want to start alkalizing, that's a great way to do it. This is why so many folks talk about having a huge green salad at some point during the middle of the day, if you can, and make it as diverse as possible. Throw some carrots and radishes and fruits in there if you even want. Like you could go a lot of different ways with it, and it could really, really make a big difference. Fruits, super alkalizing, also contain a lot of those minerals that get depleted, like the potassium, like the sodium, the magnesium. These are the most electric, the highest vibration foods on the planet are actually fruits. You can look this up. If you look up the angstroms you find in foods, the highest electrical potential in your foods actually are going to come from fruits. So, considering we are mostly electrical beings, we are not material, I would say that's kind of important. So those have to be the cornerstone of your healing protocol when it comes to inflammation. There is no alternative to that. That is the start. If you're having trouble with digestion, and there's been a lot of antibiotics and some other work that needs to be done, that's when we go to herbal protocols. That's when we go to juicing and blending, especially to start, because that makes it easier to digest. It's easier on the body to start. So, if you're having trouble with maybe some raw greens because that gut has been damaged by multiple rounds of antibiotics and different medications, great. Let's start with some juicing. Let's juice, celery and carrots and apples and all of these other things to help maximize the nutrition, but also start healing that. We can use herbs to help soothe and heal the gut, like marshmallow root, like slippery elm, like aloe. These are all incredibly healing for that gut lining. If there is microbial imbalance, I find with antibiotics, it's usually more fungal yeast. And when we're talking about parasites, then there's different herbal remedies we use for that. I like ones like biocidin. You can use um, something like super cleansar, or there's a few different other ones, but you have to get the foundation right first. Have to get the foundation right. And so many people want to jump to doing the big cleanses when they're not setting themselves up to heal properly, or they do it too fast, or it's been literally years of antibiotics on and off of them over time that it just causes some major issues down the road. So that's a big part of it. Like I said, we want 80% alkaline foods, roughly 20% acid foods. You might want to go more alkaline certain times, but we want that high fiber load. Fiber is going to be fantastic too. Why is fiber great? It's going to help stimulate and strengthen those muscles of the gut wall to push things along. This is another reason why I love using raw fruits and vegetables, especially if you could tolerate them. Fruits, generally speaking, are much easier to tolerate. Um, Vegetables can be, but you can build up slow if you don't have a lot of fiber. The average American only has like 13 to 15 grams of fiber a day. When we're talking about ideal health, we're looking upwards of 50 plus, probably a lot more than that. So go up only like 5 grams every few days or so. See how you feel. Like similar to going to the gym, you have to train your intestinal tract again. You can't expect to go to the gym and bench press 300 pounds if you haven't been to the gym in 4 years. Not going to happen. You're going to hurt yourself, or you're not even going to be able to get it up off the bar. It is very similar. It is this very similar concept. It's the same concept, actually. So, your mindset as far as it goes is really important too. So, like, we could have literally inflammatory thoughts if we get in our own way. This is why I actually posted on threads today for the first time. Like, that mindset, give yourself the time and space to actually heal. If you don't, if you're hoping that it all changes tomorrow, but you've been living this inflammatory acidic lifestyle for years, that's not realistic. You have to see, okay, this is where I'm at now. I understand that every day is not going to be perfect. How do we get I know what it looks like now. I know where I want to be 1 year from now. I know where I want to be 3 years from now. I know where I want to be 5 years from now. And when you stretch that timeline, when you look at it in that way, you realize, oh, it's much more doable. Oh, not everything needs to happen. Oh, I've been dealing for this. If you've been dealing something for 20 years, 2, 3 decades, you can't expect in 1 month everything's gone. We're good to go. That's not realistic. The general rule of thumb that I give folks, just so you get an idea of like what it takes, for every year, roughly speaking, that you've been dealing with said health challenge, you need to expect 4 to 6 weeks of healing time. That's assuming you're doing this correctly and in the ballpark. And do you need to do it 100% of the time? I would say no. The closer you get to 100%, the better your outcome's going to be. A lot of people talk about 80/20. I think that's a great foundation. And for some people, if they're way far from their baseline, that is helpful. But what I find, if you truly want to get to healing, you have to get 80/20 is essentially maintenance. Like you have 80/20 is this is where I can stay where I'm at. I'm probably not going to get worse, but if I do get better, it's going to be very slow. Really, realistically, if you want to know what it takes, it's probably closer to 90/10. I understand real life gets in the way. I'm not perfect 100% of the time. No one is. But the closer you get to 100 on that spectrum, the better off you're going to be. I prefer 90/10 because I find that actually creates a place where you can actually heal, whereas 80/20 is just kind of like maintenance. So, other things you can do, so much of this is about treating the terrain of your body similar to how you would treat a garden. An acidic garden, I talked about dandelion today on my post. The reason why dandelion weeds grow in your lawn is because they're actually a sign that your lawn is acidic, it's depleted, the microbiome is not necessarily as rich as it should be. Dandelions are very rich in a variety of different nutrients and things that are very alkalizing. They have a lot of alkaloids in them. What do we do? We spray glyphosate on them and keep our lawn clean because the HOA says so, or we want to look better than the neighbor, or some other idiotic reason. Versus letting nature tell you what's wrong and us ignoring the call. And we see that in our soil now. Like we live in a world now in America where 1% of our soils are considered nutrient dense, and we are seeing the deterioration of the average American's health. We know now that like 70% ballpark, a little bit less maybe, of Americans are either obese or overweight. Less than 10% are considered metabolically healthy. And if we continue to go down this route, it's going to crush us financially as a country. And that's on top of the inflation, which is now worse than or we're going through a financial crisis right now that is worse than the Great Depression, although it is not advertised as such yet, but that's actually what's happening. So the best chance you have is to take care of your health now. And I'll leave you with this. Like if you happen to say have a heart attack, you're living this acidic lifestyle, you're having, the steaks and the burgers and the cheese and the buns and the pasta on a regular basis, like the average American does, you say, well, oh, living a healthier lifestyle is more expensive. Well, say if you go down that route, and chances are like you will probably have some version of cardiovascular disease, your risk of getting a heart attack is much higher. If you happen to survive that heart attack, on average, that will cost you roughly $1 million over your lifetime if you survive it. So, investing in your health now is probably one of the best financial and health decisions that you can make. So, getting ahead of it, doing the stuff that you need to on a daily basis, because understand that this journey does not end. You don't win health. It is a journey that you wake up and perform and do every single day. There is no end date. I know many people want it, but that's not what it is. It is something that you practice. It is a practice that you do every day. That practice can change. You can add. You can do a lot of different things, but you have to practice it on a daily basis. So Sure, it might seem cheaper to kind of go this route in the short term, but in the long run, it will end up costing you or your family a lot more. And again, when we extend those timelines out and see the end results that of what we're doing and where we're going to end up, maybe we will make the better decisions now. Now, I'm working with folks now, working through 12-week detox programs to help kickstart this for 3 months. So if it's, excess weight, if it's gut issues, if it's, you have this excess weight in your body that you want to get off and you want to work with organic regenerative superfoods and me to walk you through what it looks like for 12 weeks working with me, you will have a guide to show you the way. And more importantly, you will have the tools you need beyond that. So you do not need someone like me ever again. The goal of investing now is so that you don't have to deal with it later and you can come back to it again and again and again without the help of someone like me. That is what this is about. My goal from when I started this was I wanted to educate people so they do not have to make the same mistakes I do. And more importantly, they could work with me once and not have to deal with me ever again or someone like me ever again. Because that's ultimately what this is. If we want a way out, that's the way out. If you want to work with me or you're interested in learning more and you need a guide through this and you want to know how the ropes be shown the ropes, DM me, detox. You could shoot me an email. If you're on YouTube, Dr. Vincent Esposito at insideouthealthwellness.com. And I'm more than happy to help. So I hope this finds you well. I hope you have a wonderful day. Looking forward to chatting soon. Again, next week, this is going to be on Zoom. I will be posting the link in my bio. I'll probably keep it a consistent time so everyone can show up, but I will make comments on it on Threads maybe now, on Instagram, so you can join. Much love. I hope you have a wonderful day. Looking forward to chatting with you soon. Have a good one.